I am hoping that we get a Ryan Gosling from Blade Runner 2049 hunting down a predator. Because that, and then like after he kills it, it's in the future. He maybe kills it in like a garbage dump or something. Below him, he sees a jacket, picks it up. What's on that jacket? A scorpion on the back of it, golden
Mm.
scorpion. He puts it
Mm-hmm.
on, and
Yep.
then we're connected to Drive too somehow.
Somehow. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Alon.
And this is David, and today I finally watched Alien.
I am so surprised you have never seen Alien before, David. It's a classic. It's a classic in sci-fi and horror.
Well, as the many people that listen to us talk would tell you, I don't watch horror movies before we started doing this podcast. So that's
I
why.
okay, I know that, but like I feel like Alien is way more like a sci-fi staple than a horror staple, right? At least that's kind of my memory of it before sitting down and watching it. I was watching it. I was like, I remember very few things about this film. And then I really thought about it. It's like, it's been over a decade since I've seen it last. I think I saw Aliens more recently. And then, of course, I saw Prometheus way more recently than that. Um, have you seen Prometheus?
I have actually. It's the only Alien movie I've seen. And I'm
Okay.
not sure. I can't remember back if I knew it was an Alien movie when I saw it, to be honest with you.
Until the end, until the xenomorph showed up at the end.
Probably that was the surprise that gave it away.
Um, so that's good. Okay, because I wanted to talk a little bit about Prometheus before, during our talk about this film, but I didn't want to ruin it for you because I think I like Prometheus. I think it has some good attributes. Let's get into Alien. It starts out with kind of a very slow, meandering tour of the Nostromo ship that all these guys are like in cryo sleep on. And then we see them waking up. One of my favorite things about this movie is the pacing of this movie. It doesn't spend a bunch of time on like crap we don't need to know, right? So like as soon as we see like the first guy wake up from the cryo sleep and everyone else is like getting up, it's like hard cut to them all like around the dinner table eating, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I like too going around and seeing the ship, right? That the opening of it, like it's a cool design for a ship. Um, it's like very dark and dreary, and like the opening, not the opening because the opening of the thing is pretty like it's bright, right? It takes place in the day, but like the I don't know, this movie had a very much The Thing feel to me, which I think what The Thing came out like a year later.
I think what reminded me most of the thing was the production design, right? Like the set design, like the way they set up the ship versus the way they set up the um, Arctic lab is very similar in feel, right? Would you agree?
A little bit, yeah, but I mean, it just The Thing is desolate, and this is desolate, right? They're way out in somewhere that Antarctica, but then in this, they're way out in a ship, out in the middle of nowhere. Um, what they said they're at one point in the movie after they wake up from cryo sleep, they're 10 months away from Earth. Um, and also the ship was designed by Geiger, who designed the aliens in this, and that actually I've told you this story before, but that does lead to probably from 2008 on why I haven't watched this movie because I went to the Geiger Museum in Switzerland and was pretty disgusted by it. What's funny is apparently they had to tell him to like tone down the sexual nature of the alien, which in that museum is just like xenomorph dildos everywhere.
um what's interesting about that is that I feel like there's parts of the movie where you kind of see this negative space behind some of these characters, and you don't know if it's the xenomorph or just like piping within the ship. Like they do a really good job of like making the the interior of the shuttle look alien like, even though I think that's supposed to be like the most human thing about it. Um, and that plays very much into what happens at the end, where he's just like nesting within the ship, and you don't know that that's him at first. But I feel like when they catch wind that he's in the air ducts, um, I guess it's a she, right? Whatever. But when the alien is in the air ducts and like, is it the tail? Is like you see something in the background move like slightly, and you're questioning yourself as the audience, like, is it the tail of the alien or is it just like a hanging part of the ship? Um, so everything that he designed, I feel like, is meant to kind of look similar to each other.
It's clearly a male alien.
Okay.
Um, yeah. Well, I mean, and once again, you have the same guy doing it, so obviously there's going to be some connectivity to the design of each. Um, I think also though, this is basically like a tugboat spaceship, right? It's towing what, like an oil refinery, I think is what it's supposed to be towing. Um, and so it's like it's just gonna look like a piece of shit ship that's like, I mean, it's just like function over form. It doesn't need to look great. So, I
I'm
mean, I
not
guess
saying it
what's
looks
the point of it?
bad. I'm just saying like sometimes you look at the piping and you question yourself: is that piping or is that the alien hiding in there? And I think that kind of attention to detail really played a big part in the anticipation, the thrill aspect of this movie.
Uh, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I never really thought of it that way. Th- th- older movies like this, like sci-fi horror films, it's kind of telegraphs when stuff's going to happen, right? Like the first real kill we get of the huge xenomorph is like when Brett goes off by himself, right? Breaks like one of the tenets of scary movies. Um, and then Dallas does the same thing. So it wasn't, there was very rarely a point where I was like, oh, it could happen at any moment. I was like, we're going to know when something's going to happen. There were a couple jump scares I'll talk about when we get there, but for the most part, yeah, it sort of telegraphs. One thing that was interesting from the start of this is I don't know that I've ever seen John Hurt as a young man. Like the thing I know him most from is playing the Hitler type character in V for Vendetta, um, and then obviously Ollivander and Harry Potter, but and a bunch of shit. Obviously, that I'm just like pegging him to these two roles later in his career. But so seeing him in like such a young role this like long ago, it was interesting. Same for Tom Skerritt, who we last saw in Top Gun that we just did. So it's interesting to see like these people that I know, but like in this like early role. It was the same kind of feeling I had in the thing with Kurt Russell, right? Because mostly I've seen him in his later stuff. So seeing them like this young is just like, it's like, oh yeah, shit, they were young at one point, and it's like cool to see them. Like I think this is Sigourney Weaver's like first role too. So um, yeah, that part like was not lost on me. The other thing I like too in the beginning is the white room where Dallas Tom Skerritt is like goes in for information. It's like looks completely different than the rest of the ship. The design of it, all white with buttons everywhere that just blink randomly.
You mean Mother?
I mean, yeah, if you want to call the room mother, I guess, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what they called it. I mean, I understand like the ship's AI, its entire like integrated system is Mother, but I think that's every time they're like, "Hey, let's report to Mother," or like, "Hey, let's get information from Mother," they always end up in that room. Um, Actually, for me, I think one of the biggest jump scares doesn't even come from the alien. when we get to the point where the characters realize like, oh, we're woken up way too early, what are we doing here, what's like our new mission and whatever, um from the point where they want to go to this like, well, they don't really have a choice to go to the planet, but they go to the planet, and then everything they do from getting back from like the alien planet slash ship, all of their decisions are horrible. Like every single one of them makes horrible decisions, which ultimately led them to their doom. But were you surprised how stupid everyone was?
Well, the one thing I noticed from the beginning is how they basically set up like Sigourney Weaver is the most intelligent. Um, she's like the Chris Evans character from Sunshine, like the logical, intelligent, the one that really should be in charge but isn't. And everyone else just, yeah, like the captain Dallas just keeps making mistakes, right? He's like, well, I'm outside, so I want to be let in, even though I should be quarantining. Like, you need to let me in because I want to. The other thing though is like just a lot of things in the movie don't make sense to you until you realize, like maybe three-fourths into the film, that this company is basically working behind their backs to get this alien back to Earth, I guess, as like a war machine, basically, because like it's in their contract that they have to go answer this SOS, and it's like, why is that in your contract? Well, that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? And then
Right.
I saw Prometheus, and like spoiler if you haven't seen Prometheus, right? But there's like there's a robot plot in that. I don't even know if that's a I think that's known from the beginning of the movie, but um the Ash thing, even though I saw Prometheus, was a complete surprise to me. But
Yeah.
everything Ash does was like, this makes no fucking sense. Why is he doing this? Why, like, what is he, just the most inept, evil character? Like, what is going on with Ash?
Yeah, I mean, once you learn that Ash is a robot AI, everything starts making sense, right? He's the one that overrode Ripley's decision to not let them in. He, he overrode the doors and opened the doors. He's the one who didn't like double body scan Kane once he's woken up because I don't know, like why wouldn't you body scan him again and see if he has like a baby alien inside him? Like everything dumb kind of resonates from the fact that Ash is Ash knows that none of this will affect him because he's not human, right? Like that's where it's like,
But also, he's just got like a different. He's basically like Hal from 2001. He is just focused on the mission which he's been given, and the rest of it doesn't matter. The other thing too is, I was like, how did they break the ship just by landing on this planet? And then you realize that that probably had some, like Ash may have had something to do with that too, because otherwise it's just
oh
so convenient.
no, I just took it that when they opened the pod bay doors, when they opened the doors and the weather was like so harsh and horrible. I took it that the terrain and the weather just damaged the ship on the way down.
It's just like so circumstantial though. I at least, like, yeah, I don't think they address it that he could have done that. There's a lot of things they don't address that he may have been a part of, but at least for me it's an explanation that like makes it make a little more sense to me, that like, oh, maybe he did that. Well, and the other thing too, you talked about how why didn't he do a body scan? But I guess when Ripley walks up on him and he's looking through the microscope, that's him supposedly looking at like the baby alien in the stomach is what that he's viewing, like a piece
And
of
a
it or
and a
something.
and a microscope? Oh, a piece of it. Yeah, maybe. I mean, he could feed them bad information. He was like, "Oh yeah, the tube down the dude's throat is definitely feeding him oxygen." It's like, "No, that's putting like alien semen down his throat or something or whatever it took to put the baby inside the dude." Um wh- when they come up, okay, so here's what I wanted to talk to you about. Do you think alien life is just common for these characters? Because when they get to the planet and they find the ship and they go inside the ship and they see this giant alien like in a seat, and you and I both know it's like, the attachment to his face and the ripping out of the thing is from Prometheus. Like that is the same ship from Prometheus. um I Their reactions, like Kane's reaction and Dallas's reaction, is like, Oh yeah, it's an alien. Look at that. Like, is this not the first one they've seen? Is it very common?
Well, I think that guy is the one who's supposedly sent the distress signal. So yeah, I imagine they're talking with non-chest bursting aliens all the time, probably.
You see what I
So
mean
yeah,
though? Because then if it's like if it's not their first run in with aliens, then they played everything very stupid. Especially Kane. Sorry, but Kane deserved to be the first one to die, and to die exactly like that. Because he goes, he finds the eggs, and then he's like, "Oh, there's bioorganism in here." Dude, why stand over it as it like slowly opens up? Like just book it. Like get the hell out of there.
yeah, but if they have such a like a knowledge of aliens, then they're probably like, oh, why would it, you know what I mean? Like it might not be aliens normally might not be something they should be scared of, right?
I guess that's where I'm questioning their knowledge of
But
aliens,
that,
whether
I mean,
it's
that they shared a common communication tool with the alien that died above, right? He was able to send an SOS on a in a way that they would receive it.
it wasn't an SOS. It was a warning. Which it's kind of weird that Ripley finds out that it's a warning and not an SOS, and then when they are like, "Hey, let us in through the doors," and she's like, "No, I'm not letting you in through the door. There's like mandatory quarantine." Why didn't she say, "Look, it wasn't an SOS. It was a warning, and now we better be super safe than rather than sorry." You know?
It wouldn't have mattered because Ash was going to let them in, so it doesn't really matter.
And that's before
Um,
we knew Ash was a double agent.
One thing I thought was funny, they like landed 2,000 meters away from the like distress call, so that they had to walk to it, which like in this it makes a little more sense because of like the terrain they had to go through, and like the distress call was from coming from like a ship that had crash landed or whatever. But it reminded me of Interstellar, where they landed 2,000 meters away from the distress beacon, and it's just this flat water. They could have landed anywhere, and they're like, let's just make it harder on ourselves.
Yeah, especially since time is not our friend on this planet. But yeah, no, for this, it's exactly why they did that. It's because they probably couldn't land anywhere else due to the terrain. Um, so they get Kane gets infected. We don't quite know that yet. But when they're led inside the ship, the way they break open his helmet and then the does this have a name? The thing on his face,
It's like the
the
face hugger.
face hugger. That's what we're calling it. Okay. Um,
That's what
it's
people
such
who watch alien movies call it.
it's such a cool design, especially like the mechanics as it's like tightening around his neck.
Originally, the face hugger was supposed to be green, and they got the mold back for it, and it looked like what it looks like in the movie. And they're like, "Oh fuck, this is way better," and just left it that natural color.
Natural.
So yeah, that part is obviously cool. The design of it, I felt bad for Lambert because she's like freaking out. She did play a little bit of like a woe is me like damsel in this movie instead of like, you know what I mean? Like I think they could have made her a little tougher, but honestly I don't know what her role was. So
Hey,
maybe
hey,
that wasn't
hey.
something.
There's only one room for one tough gal on this ship, okay?
So the tough gal goes in one room, and then like what, there's separate rooms, or did you mean
Yeah.
there's only room enough for one?
There's only room enough for one gal
Because how
room.
big is this one room?
Shut
Was it
up.
like a um so we get back to Kane, who what he has to I like when they cut the face hugger, and the acid part is really, it's ingenious. It's
Yeah.
like a it's such a good idea to like, one, it sort of reaffirms what it's reaffirmed later by what Ash says when he's like, this is a perfect killing machine, because it's, yeah, it's like you can't even do anything to it. It's made of acid if you kill it, right? um so that part is really cool, and just the whole Kane part, like the beginning of this movie, the first hour or whatever is super slow, but it's all interesting. and
Yeah.
so it keeps you going until you then get to the point where like the later parts are the kind of the thrilling part, the scary part, the the horror movie. But the beginning is still so awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, it keeps you intrigued. Everything from like the fake science and everything like that, especially the back and forth, because it's such an emotional roller coaster where you have Kane, he's still alive. They want to keep him alive, and then another dumb thing they do is when they go back inside the room and the face hugger is off of Kane, they leave that door open behind them for such a long period of time.
I had
I
the
was like,
exact same thought.
close that fucking door immediately. They finally do it, and the face hugger is like up in the ceiling or something. But then they're just like, oh, Kane's fine. There's absolutely no other test or quarantine that we should put him in. Let him not only join us in the main room, but also eat right alongside us. Let him also like, cough in our face and shit like that too.
Yeah, I mean, but what do you expect though? Like once again, it's like if we're to assume that they've met aliens, but they haven't met these type of aliens, and then you see Kane, and he's just like, they're like, "How are you doing?" He's like, "What do you mean? What does it look like? I'm doing great." I don't know that it's like unexpected them because also this is when they find out like right before this, Lambert's like, yeah, we have 10 months left, so they all have to get back into cryo anyway for the rest of the trip. Um, One thing before we get to the exploding chest scene, because that's I know where we're going next. There's a couple things I want to say. Like one, I don't know if it's necessarily a common trope, but it is something I always think about in these movies where characters basically have been given a job and they finished it, but they continue on in a place where they shouldn't be. So in this scenario, they're supposed to go check out this SOS that they think. They find out, oh, this alien's dead. They should leave right then. There's no need, based on what they've been told, to keep going. And
Right.
Lambert's like, we should go. And Dallas and Kane are like, nah, let's just crawl down this fucking tunnel. And so like that always like it's like, oh man, you didn't even need to do it. There was no need, and you like cost everyone's life except for Sigourney Weaver because of course she's going to live, obviously. Um,
Well, they call it laziness, but movies time and time again show that you should never go above and beyond the job that you're given.
do they do that?
Horror movies do.
So we get back to Kane is discovered as being fine, and they're like, all right, let's go get dinner. And then we got to get into cryo sleep. And this scene right here, it has to be the impetus for the thing scene where it pops out of the chest, right? Like to the point of the way the little alien runs away afterwards reminded me so much of like the thing, the dude's head growing legs and crawling away and Kurt Russell seeing it. Still
Yeah.
like my favorite moment of that movie when they like just blast it. Um it's just iconic.
Did you know that the exact way it was going to pop out, like the exploding and the blood and everything, um many of the crew members, the actors, they didn't know that it was going to be happening like that, so the surprise shock on like Lambert's face and Dallas's face getting sprayed with blood is genuine like shock and horror.
Well, yeah, I mean that. Yeah, that obviously makes sense too. Like that, they used to do that type of shit all the time. There's a scene in this that was cut where Lambert slaps Sigourney Weaver, and apparently Sigourney Weaver kept flinching, which of course, like when you're getting slapped, you're gonna flinch. And so the director told Lambert to just really fucking give it to her, and it's like you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, you
You can't
can't
just
do that
you can't as
anymore.
a director tell someone to slap the shit out of someone. I mean, if they agree on it, right? Um, but yeah, that like that scene is so cool. Well, the other thing I read though is that there's like a rumor or a myth that it was all filmed in one take, but that's not true. It apparently took two takes, and if you look at it when you watch it in the movie, there's a first it pops out a little bit, and it's like just looks like a hole, and you're like, oh, nothing really happened, and then it pops out again. That first pop out was like the failed one, the first take.
Right.
But yeah, it's just it's really like a well done scene. It always surprises me. Like obviously that's why this is a classic, but it always surprises me when you go back and watch a movie and things hold up. Because I've seen like A New Hope where the technology does not hold up, right?
Uh-huh.
But when you see like this or like The Thing, how cool that looks, or 2001 that we just did, it's just so impressive because it's so long ago. It's all practical and it looks amazing.
So this is kind of what I wanted to talk about comparing this movie with Prometheus is that Prometheus hits a lot of the same beats, right? You got this like AI robot guy that looks human but isn't human, that's really out for the benefit of the company and not the crew members. You have one of the crew members being outside of the ship too long in the alien ship, getting face hugged and infected with like a baby alien. You have that in both movies. You have them, like one of the crew members not telling them how someone else is infected. You have that in both movies. You have uh, then that crew member like infecting the rest of the or putting in danger the rest of the crew, right? So you have a lot of the same parallels that Alien hits that Prometheus almost just recycles again. That's why I feel like Prometheus wasn't, you know, I think it was a good film, but it wasn't given as high of regards as it should have been because I feel like people have felt like they've seen it before.
I don't remember Prometheus that well to agree or disagree with you. I thought it had like a lot of a different story. And also the different way it went with the fact that Fassbender, he's a robot the entire time, right? And I also think like that
Do
movie
you? I
plays
don't
with.
remember if you do.
I think you do.
Hmm.
But I think what that movie does is it plays with, is he good or bad? I think a little bit like it plays with what his motivation is. And if I remember correctly, I think it comes out he's like kind of good, but I don't. Once again, I haven't seen that movie since theaters. Um, Whereas this movie, like, yeah, the real part of it that's like the thing is one, like when you watching this now after having seen the thing first, I'm like, all right, who's infected with the alien? Because for a while I was like, is Ash infected with like an alien that's controlling him? Especially the scene where he starts beating the shit out of everybody. I was like, what the fuck is happening here? Why does he have superpowers? And I was like, oh,
He
this is
starts
kind of.
sweating milk.
I was like, this is kind of stupid, honestly. And then you find out he's a robot. I was like, oh, okay, all right. They brought it back. Um,
Aliens, dumb. Robot, all right, makes sense now.
well, and a parasitic alien in your stomach giving you superhuman powers. Like the idea that that short white guy could beat up the 6'4", was it Parker?
Yeah,
Is just asinine to me. Like it wouldn't happen. So when you get like an explanation that makes sense, you're like, oh, okay, that's why this is an awesome movie.
yeah,
And what a couple clues too that we didn't talk about. So Ripley wants to get rid of the face hugger when it falls on her, and Dallas is like, well, Ash is the science officer, so he gets to decide, and Ash obviously is going to keep it. Um, and Ripley just goes up to Dallas. She's like, I don't fucking trust this guy. What is wrong with you? Like, how long have you worked with him as a science officer? And he's like, I worked with a. Dallas says, I worked with a different guy, and they basically just gave me this guy last minute. Like, that should have been the first clue that something was up. And I guess something's up, but I don't know. I just never thought robot.
well, you definitely know something's up because you're absolutely right. He's acting weird. He's acting like non-empathetic at all. um it makes you feel like he's on the alien side, like he's doing everything to promote this invasion of the ship. um but I love, okay, so my biggest jump scare, honest to god, was nothing to do with the alien. When
He was in
Rig
the white room.
yeah, when Ripley is in the
Mother.
mother room, and then all of a sudden, fucking Ash's head is just peeking out next to her. I was like, holy shit.
What's funny though is at that point I was still like, oh well, she's like bigger than you and probably stronger than you, and I was like, what? And then she starts throwing her around. I was like, what the fuck? But yeah, that is like that's a good jump scare. The one that got me, and jump scares don't get me, and this one really is kind of interesting that it still like made me jump. Was Lambert loses the alien on the radar as Dallas is there, and then she's like, oh, he's coming up on you, and then Dallas turns and it's just is there. I was like, what the fuck? Because it just
Yeah.
even though you knew the alien was coming, you didn't expect it to be that way. It was almost as if the alien yelled "boo." It was like "boo."
Yeah, and what's funny about that scene is that when he started going down the ladder, at the last second you hear Lambert's like, "No, not that way. Like that's the way it's coming from." I was like, "Shouldn't you have told him that like to start?" You know?
Yeah, but I couldn't tell what the fuck that screen was she was looking at. Was it like a 2D with like the dots lower or below, or was that just like a top view of the
I don't
vents? Like,
know. I don't know. I think it was a top view of the vents. That's my understanding of it. Because then you couldn't tell what level the alien was on
right.
at that point. Um, Did you appreciate the landing screen when they were landing on the ship? I know I'm backing up a little bit here. Didn't that remind you of the landing screen from 2001? The well, like with the squares. Like
Yeah, a
yeah,
little bit. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, so 2001, Star Wars: A New Hope, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Apparently, like the what Ridley Scott said he got his inspiration from
Texas
this because
Chainsaw Massacre. Oh yeah, the inbred aliens. That's right.
well because the selling of this is like this is Leatherface in space. The other one, obviously, like this is Jaws in space,
Uh
which I've
huh.
talked with you about this before, and this like definitely affirmed this for me. The couple times you see the full alien, you're like, that's a tall guy in a suit. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
some skinny legs. That's a leotard around his legs. That's just a tall guy in a suit. It looks very impressive when they just show the head. It still looks impressive when you show the whole thing. But one of the things that I heard about this, I actually think I heard about it on like a Futurama um,
Commentary.
commentary track where they were talking about how originally they were going to show the alien a lot more, and they just made the decision not to, sort of based on Jaws, maybe a little bit, to just show it a lot less. And I think that's obviously super effective. They still show it a lot, but it's only got like 4 minutes of screen time in the whole thing.
Yeah. And you know what's funny about that too is I'm pretty sure they did the same thing with I was gonna say they did the same thing with Predator, but with Predator, they actually shot the whole thing basically, and they thought the design for the Predator was so bad that they went in, redesigned what the Predator looked like, and then reshot all the scenes with it. Um, as technology, gets better and better and better, take Prometheus for example. That's not a guy in a suit, right? That's like a full CGI thing. But it looks so good, and the way they have like their legs bent and like crawling on walls and shit, that's way scarier than having him stand there looking like a guy in a suit, right?
No, yeah, absolutely. You just mentioned Predator, and I feel the need to bring up one of the most awesome things I read about this, and that is that Ridley Scott has said that Blade Runner and Alien take place in the same universe. And also, Alien and Predator take place in the same universe. And with
Obviously.
the success of Prey, the latest Predator movie, I am hoping that we get a Ryan Gosling from Blade Runner 2049 hunting down a predator, because that, and then like after he kills it, it's in the future. He maybe kills it in like a garbage dump or something. Below him, he sees a jacket, picks it up. What's on that jacket? A scorpion on the back of it, golden
Mm.
scorpion. He puts it
Mm-hmm.
on, and
Yep.
then we're connected to Drive too somehow.
Somehow. Um, So I'm hearing a lot of great stuff about Prey. I haven't seen it. I don't think you have either, right?
I have
Um,
not.
but I've been hearing a lot of good stuff about it. One of my favorite things that have come out of the successfulness of Prey is people thinking like, oh, what other horror movies can we just drop into different time zones and it works, right? and they were like, why does Alien have to be like either in the present day or in the future? Why can't Alien be like way in the past? Like drop a couple aliens in feudal Japan and you got yourself a fucking movie, you know?
I've seen that meme about 70 times since Prey came out.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think they already did. It was feudal Japan, right? When they dropped the Ninja Turtles in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, and that worked
one
out.
one of my favorite things that came out of that meme, if you can call it a meme, is make a new Final Destination movie, but make it in an 1800 pirate ship
I mean, it's like all the deaths take place on the
on
ship.
the ship. Yeah.
It's pretty confined. I think like Final
No, no, no. Like the
Destination, where
first, no, no, no. Like the first, the every someone gets a premonition of like all the deaths happening in the first scene, all that happening on this on the one ship. But then like they land, they get to shore, they like live out their pirating life or whatever, and then all the deaths start happening again. But everything is like, that century, that time. So, people getting beheaded by cannonballs, accidentally trip onto a guillotine. I don't know, make stuff up.
did you just say guillotine? Your dad's gonna disown you.
What do you want me to say? A guillotine. A guillotine. It's a
Yeah,
guillotine. What do you want me to say?
it's a guillotine.
Oh, guillotine. Whatever.
It's a double L. I don't know if it's double L. Can we get back to it without you this pitch meeting that our episode has turned into? We are at the point where the search party gets brought up. Basically, an episode of Scooby Doo. They're divided
Mm-hmm.
into two teams,
Yep.
and Dallas does something really smart. He separates Ash and Sigourney Weaver because that wouldn't have worked out very well.
Nope.
And I, at this point, I'm like, why the fuck is there a cat on this ship? I didn't really seem to understand that.
Is that Scooby Doo?
No, that's Jonesy.
No. You're such an asshole. Um. So, have you ever heard the term "save the cat"?
No,
Like when writing a script, you've never heard of the term "save the cat"?
it's like a. Is it a reason for the protagonist to go back and do something kind of stupid
It's
that puts
a
them
it's a
in more danger?
no, it's a reason for the audience to like the protagonist even more. And I'm pretty sure it came from this movie. Um, when you're writing, it doesn't have to be a cat. It doesn't have to be this specific thing. It could be a kid. It could be a dog. It could be something. But the protagonist has to go back and like save an innocent to like prove that they're good enough to be the hero of the story. And obviously, literally it's a cat, and Ripley does it many times in this film, so that's why we have the cat.
I guess, but like, you like Ripley, right? Like, like you don't need really. I can see it in maybe scenarios where you have a character that you're not sure about, and then it does something like that, like saves a cat. Um, in the beginning too, I thought they were going to kill the cat because they sent Brett after it. Like, Brett, you let the cat go get the cat. And then I don't realize until the end that that's Ripley's cat.
Right, Jonesy, yeah.
Yeah, so like, I don't think it was necessary, but then in this part I was like, it just left me confused, like what the cat was there for. Because they don't explain it until the end, basically.
Yeah, also, was the cat, I guess the cat was also in cryo sleep with them for all these years.
I think so, because then she puts it in cryo sleep at the end, so I guess
Yeah.
that's what that was. Um, this is the point where Brett goes off by himself, and obviously, he's gonna die, and it's just a matter of how long it takes. It went on for a while. It was super intense to me.
Yeah.
Was funny. He goes into this one room, and there's like light coming from above and water, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, what room of the ship? And apparently the studio and the producers were like, yeah, what is that? Doesn't make any sense on a ship. And Ridley Scott was like, I know, but it looks cool. I just want to keep it in.
So Taylor had the same thing. Taylor watched this with me and she was like, is that like alien pissing in his mouth or something? And he's just taking it all in. I think they said something about how the atmosphere within the ship changed, right? So I took it as like maybe that was like a condensation off of something. They were also talking about some sort of like abundance of coolant that they have on the ship. So maybe something like one of the engines was like, I don't know. I don't know. I was confused on why he was letting it in his mouth, but yeah,
I think he was just like thirsty, basically. So I don't know. The death is really cool. I like, obviously the way they use the cat to kind of the classical. It's behind me, and I don't realize it's basically a fucking Looney Tunes cartoon. As long as I don't know it's behind me, it won't attack until I recognize that it's there. Um, I was then afterwards like Parker and Ripley are describing it, and I was like, why didn't they didn't show them run in, right? So it's like,
right.
but they definitely had to have seen it, I guess. It was just weird the way like it cut to that.
No, I agree with you. I also like how the cat just looked very nonchalantly at like his friend dying, just cat being a cat.
Oh, it wasn't nonchalantly. It was like, yes, yes, kill him.
But yeah, they were described. They were like, "It's as big as a man. It must be over 6 foot tall." I'm like, "How do you know?" The only thing I could think of is that maybe they saw his body. They saw. You know what? Honestly, I don't know. Does he eat them? Because they never saw Dallas again.
Um, I think he does. I'm not exactly sure. So originally, the predator, or sorry, the predator, the alien was supposed to be like more sexual in nature.
No kidding.
Um, like there was rumor that, or like theories that he raped, sexually assaulted Lambert when he took her, because you see like the blood and all that. But from what I read, it was basically he like the reason she died is he tried to push her body through a hole in the air vents that was too small, so it just fucking like destroyed her.
Oh
Um,
shit.
but there was also supposed to be a sex scene between Dallas and Ripley, and the alien was supposed to have seen it but not attack. And so then later on, when the alien at the end, when he gets on the pod with her, Ripley was going to be completely naked, and it was going to be kind of a sexual thing going on between them, which is like, you know, not that we needed the sex part of it, but like I guess I didn't really fully comprehend like when I was like, oh, why is there a cat on the ship? But this is basically like their life, right? And so a part of the aspect of like the sex between Dallas and Ripley, they talked about having like a lesbian relationship between Ripley and Lambert. All of that was because there was just like a lot of casual sex going on. There was a lot of like, we're stuck in this situation, so it's like whatever, which I guess they do more in Prometheus. Let's see, I don't remember that movie. It's a long time ago. But I like, they obviously had to take those aspects out of it to like, probably for rating purposes or whatever. But it's interesting to read that. It's always interesting in these movies when you like, I think probably Blade Runner is a good example, or like The Thing or whatever, when you read more about like the director's vision of like what some stuff that didn't get put in was supposed to represent, and then you read it and you're like, oh, it gives you a more full picture, you like the movie more, but they didn't have the time to put it in. I always find that interesting.
So what you're saying is that the alien fucked Dallas and then made him disappear.
Yeah, yeah, probably. I mean, we don't even know how they have sex in this, although if you go in the the Geiger Museum, it's pretty clear that it's very similar to us.
Where is that? Is that in like Switzerland?
It's in Switzerland.
Got it. So I know we talked about quite a bit how Ash is a robot and like how the crew members come to figure that out. But when they're like fighting him, basically, right? Like all three crew members are fighting him. Um, and finally they just kind of like behead the guy. I love how they go from like this robot mold of his head to like when they get him on the table, it's just actually his head. And then when they like shut him down or like they start burning him, it goes back to the robot like dummy version.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things that's like kind of funny, but it's like you kind of have to like let that go, right? You have to understand like when this was made and like the limitations, right?
Of course, yeah.
And also in like in 2022 with like how shitty CGI is lately, like it probably still wouldn't look great.
Yeah. Did it ever explain why he drank milk so much?
Yeah, I didn't know what the fuck it was. I was like, so I thought it was like alien juices coming out of him. I think I said this earlier. Like I thought he was like that was going to be the big reveal because, and we skipped over this a little bit, but Ripley takes over and she's basically like, all right, we're going to systematically go through and shut down the vents to kill this thing. And Lambert's screaming like, let's just get on the ship to get out of here. The little pod to get out of here. And apparently, it only fits three people, so that's not even an option, right? But I like the dialogue between Parker and Ripley, them yelling at each other because they're speaking over each other, which is like feels more real. But they don't usually allow that in movies because it's kind of harder to hear both of them, right? And that's exactly what this
Yep.
is. But their dialogue is so like guttural and real and just like it doesn't the words don't matter, it's like the emotions that you just kind of get it as they're yelling back and forth. But that happens and then we get sort of a little confrontation with Ash and Ripley where she's like, I'm gonna go talk to Mother because this isn't adding up. um and then that's the scene where we get like the jump scare you described from Ash and like then him just having superhuman strength, which made no sense to me at the time. And so that is such a great reveal, and it's just so surprising to me that I didn't think about it, and that it was like it was nice to like not have one of those ruined for me, even though I should have figured it
I
out.
think for us it was about like the times of this twist being in this movie. Like I feel like we would have seen this better if this was a newer film, but the fact that this to us was an older film, we wouldn't even think that this movie would have thought of this twist. Does that make sense? Like we like the technology to just like make him a robot is not there for me in my head, but they did it. I mean, I was talking about how 2001 was such an ambitious film for like the 60s. But this was such an ambitious film for the brink of the 80s/70s.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the fact that they were able to make it look even half convincing, right? Like obviously you can see the strings that like bring it all together, like, but it still looked really good. And like even the chest burster scene, the way they did that, which is practical effects, right? They had the actor underneath the table with just like a fake his legs and like head and arms were sticking through the table and just a fake torso. So it looks like, the thing's popping out of John Hurt, but it's not, right? And in this, it was like, it was a lot harder to hide them, but I think you just kind of accept it. Um, the scene where Ash is like beating the shit out of everyone, and then basically it almost is like he's gonna tear Parker's chest off when he grabs
Yeah,
him. I was just
yeah.
like, what is going? And it at that point, it should be obvious to me, but I think it's all happening so quickly, and you're just kind of engrossed in it. You're like, what the fuck is going on here? Like how is this little man doing this?
Yeah, I mean, what a great casting choice too. Is like casting someone that would just not, you would not even think being capable of doing that. Um, in Prometheus, they cast Michael Fassbender, and if Michael Fassbender starts tearing the chest off people, I'd be like, oh, okay, I buy that. Not from this guy.
Right. Well, and the guy that plays Parker is 6 feet 4 inches too. He's a huge dude, and so like yeah, it makes it all the more like what is happening here. I love when Ash starts explaining everything because I think it's once again I keep going back to Blade Runner, but it's like it's laying down the bones for the rest of this movie. Like Blade Runner lays down a lot of stuff that it doesn't necessarily get into as far as like what what actually qualifies as life and like who gets rights and all that. And then this one they set up how badass this alien is with Ash. He's like It's pure. It's a survivor. It has no morality. It has no remorse. It's a perfect like killing machine, and that company wants it for for a war machine. What's funny too is like the version I don't think I had a remastered version, so I don't remember seeing the company's name. And so when they show the company's name in Prometheus, I was like, that doesn't mean anything to me. But like everyone who saw it is like, oh yeah, Alien. But what this movie does a great job of is setting up how much of a much of a killing machine this alien is for future movies. Even though in this one, Sigourney Weaver kind of dispatches it very easily, and yeah, it kills a bunch of people, but we don't get to see its like true raw power. But the setup for those later movies is great.
Yeah. When we get to the ending um, of the movie where she opens up the hatch and like blows it away through the airlock, reminds me of the scene in Infinity War where Peter Parker's like, "Have you seen that really old movie Alien?" And then does the same thing to the villain
All right.
in that film, opens up the airlock. Um, so I, so I was just waiting for that for her to do that, and I forgot how, because obviously we're watching the movie. She gets into the pod, she cryo freezes Jonesy, and she starts stripping down, relaxing almost. And I'm like, there's 13 minutes of this movie left. And I know the alien is in there, but I'm forgetting how this all plays out. And then she like goes to the control panel or something, right? And the alien head is exposed, but like I said, it looks like part of the ship because the same guy designed everything about this movie. Um, and I was like, is that the alien? Like, I'm thinking about it in my head. I was like, that's the alien's head. I'm like, if not, that just looks like the alien's head. And then it moves, and I was like, holy shit. That's scary. That was my second jump scare. Ash was the first. The alien in the escape pod moving was my second.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, we skipped over a little bit, but it's kind of just like it's not very heavily like plot, you know. So she decides to blow up the ship and get in the pod. She sets the 10-minute timer, and it says you have 10 minutes till it blows up, and you can override this for 5 more minutes. And I was like, all right, so is that going to? I guess that's going to come into play, right? Like, why would they tell us that?
It comes into play immediately.
Well, it has to. It's only 5 minutes. But the xenomorph is just chilling there in the way. He just so happens to be in the hallway she needs to get to. So then she goes back, misses turning it off by half a second. So she's like, all right, well, fuck. Now I have to just go the same way.
Right.
And when she runs into the pod and he's not there, I was like, he's totally in the fucking pod.
Well,
Like,
she runs back
it,
to get Jonesy, the cat, right? Because she fucking leaves the cat there, and then she runs back to go double backs and go get the cat. And I love she gets the cat, like she goes out of her way to get Jones, and then when she gets to the escape pod, she just fucking throws Jones in the cage, like just nonchalantly into the escape pod. Like fuck you, Jones.
Well, yeah, well, she went back to get him while Parker and Lambert were dying, which is why she couldn't get to them in time. And then, yeah, she goes down that hallway and the xenomorphs are sitting there and she just like tosses the cat at him and runs back. And then, yeah, and so she can't blow it up in time and she goes back and, yeah, she just throws him in the pod. There was some like people weren't really happy with like how like she stripped down so much and like they thought it was a little bit, you know, lecherous or whatever. You're just doing this to titillate the audience. But it's like she was getting in the cryo freezer and in the beginning they were like wearing very little clothing. Um so it's like those were like the tiniest underwear though, like the bottoms she was wearing. Like they could have chose something maybe a little
Let me
bigger.
tell you something funny about that scene. Are you ready for this? Because this blew my mind. Okay. The outfit choice for Ripley's character at the end was completely Sigourney Weaver's choice. She actually wanted to be butt ass naked for the entire ending, and Ridley Scott's like, no, we can't do that. So there's a quote during the commentary for the movie by Ridley Scott. He said she refused to pull up her panties and shave her minge at all. We had to pay someone in 1979 something like $5,000 to airbrush all of her pubic hair on every single cell of the film, and it took weeks.
Can you imagine that being your job too? It's like weeks to get each hair out.
What you did today, honey?
I like the very ending, the way the aliens blasted out. It's very like quick too, it's quick once it happens, but like it's very like systematic the way she hides and she puts the suit on very slowly. And when she's putting the suit on, you kind of know what she's gonna do. And then she sits down and puts the seatbelt on, basically. I don't know what she uses to hit the alien to draw it out, but like all of that is really cool. You do get to see like the alien look almost. It's like the other time that it looks super fake, right?
Mm-hmm.
As it's like just hanging out the door, you see the whole alien, and then when it starts to climb back through the jet engine, I was like, oh man, like obviously we're running out of time in the movie, but I was like, this thing, yeah, it won't stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think it's like a mini harpoon. I mean, don't ask me why they have a mini harpoon in like their pack, but yeah, I think it looked like a mini harpoon. You're absolutely right. When the alien is crawling back through the jet engine, I was like, how long are they gonna like churn this out? And then she turns on the engines and it just burns it all to hell. And I was like, okay, all right, now the movie's over.
When I first was watching the ending of this, and you also see like how much time is left, I was like, okay, they're probably gonna just she's gonna have gotten off the ship, because a lot of these older movies didn't have these fourth, fifth, and sixth endings. They sort of ended very like naturally, and so I was just like, okay, she got on the ship, and I was like, maybe the alien won't be there, but I was like, it just doesn't make sense in this scenario. But it's like older movies would tend to not have these like drawn out endings. They would have like just a more conventional one, but this didn't do
I
that.
thought what you might have thought is how are they setting this up for the sequel, right? Like how are they setting up this for aliens? And I thought one of the cool ways that they could have done this is that as the escape pod is escaping, it could show the alien being on the outside of the ship, like clinging on to the outside of the ship as they're going away, and then that cut to black, being like that ending.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that could happen too. I have no idea what happens in Aliens,
I'm
so
excited.
I don't want to consider what. Yeah, until we watch it. Now that we're done talking, there are a couple like interesting casting things on this. Harrison Ford turned down the role of Captain Dallas. I um I think that only would have made the movie a little weirder having him in this part, because it's like, I don't know, is this like, that would be like one of the darkest roles he's taken, or like the darkest movie that he's been in,
Yeah.
like a straight horror movie. Um, Apparently Sigourney Weaver beat out Meryl Streep for the role, and also this was around the time that Streep was mourning the death of John Cazale. So that may have played into her not getting it. The other thing is, so Balaji Badayao is the person who plays the alien. He's 6'10". Do you know who he beat out to get that part? They found him in a bar, and some guy was like, "You'd be perfect for this." But do you know who he beat out?
Who?
Peter Mayhew, otherwise known as Chewbacca.
Chewbacca. Yeah.
I, for the longest time, didn't want to watch these movies just because they weren't really up my alley. Kind of a horror alien movie, like, but you live long enough and you hear people talk about something glowingly enough, and then you watch like The Exorcist, The Thing, Halloween, and you're like, oh no, these movies are actually really good. They knew how to make these in the 70s and 80s, and I'm really glad we watched it because it is really good, and I'm excited to see Aliens, and then I'm excited to see Alien 3, and I might stop there, but I'm excited for those now, and so I'm glad that we did this.
I'm excited for you to watch Aliens. It's one of those. I feel like a renowned sequel. Like people say, oh, the sequel is better than the original. For a couple of films out there, I think this is one of them. But yeah, I like this whole like sci-fi thing we're going, and we're slowly transitioning into more horror stuff as our September October movie choices are coming in. So this is a good path for us. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Alon.
And this is David, and today I finally watched Alien.